Hello, welcome to you. Yes, thank you very much for giving me this warm welcome. It's really a big pleasure for me to be in Prague. It's always a big pleasure to go to Prague, and even on a fancy stage like this, I'm happy that we, in our digitized time, still meet, talk, discuss, and aren't just invited as a hologram, which might be the future also maybe, but hopefully not so soon as of now. We just learned about how digitization can increase efficiency, how, and that was especially interesting for me with my own professional background, how to digitize an office. Because in my previous life, before I digitized myself, I was a state secretary in a government, 5 years long, in a beautiful small southeastern German state in Saxony, that's 1 hour north from Prague. I had a lot of contacts also with the Czech government, and we had a lot of cross-border issues, especially because I was responsible on transport. And so I learned to live and to also survive in this a little bit bureaucratic background where I was working. Then I joined Uber, and my first day was like this, very shared. Oh, look, great that you're here. Let's say, oh, there's Luis is in vacation, take his table for the day now. And a computer, yeah, take an Uber and go to a store called, like a company that's named after a fruit, and get your own apple. And that was also to see and to understand how different, how disrupted processes that were in the previous time very complicated with a lot of people helping you are becoming and are transforming a lot. And that's the same also what happens to the mobility sector. And when we look to the current situation of the mobility in the world, we have 1.2 billion cars. And we just heard in the previous speech about efficiency, operational efficiency. Those 1.2 billion cars are not really used in an efficient way because 95% of the time they are just parked. So they are usually parking somewhere in the cities. They are using the city space where people could otherwise do some nice things, so you could plant trees or use it more efficient. And when they are driven, usually, and when you look around, and that's in all cities in the world the same, usually there's only one, sometimes two, sometimes a few more people in the car. So it's really not a very efficient use of this high cost-intensive capital allocation. We see in many cities, as in Prague, as in many other cities, that's New York, that we have a very good and very well-developed public transport system, where really millions of people, in some cities, billions of trips doing every year. But at the same moment, in a city like New York, but in all other cities also, and road city congestion is an issue for many, many cities in the world, and linked with this also many emission challenges. Still more than 2 million people use their own private car to go into the city and outside of the city. In some cases, it's with a very good reason because they have a very special mobility need. In other cases, it's more for a question of comfort or of status and so on. But it's still a very big issue that there is some need, some possibility, some opportunity in order to do this more efficient. And about 10 years ago, the iPhone was invented, or at least brought to the market then, and it really changed a lot the world, because with an iPhone you can easily arrange mobility from A to B on a very individual way and on a very cost-efficient way. So with our app that we provide, and also apps of other competitors, you can really ease very much the booking process. So you can see it on the left side that you see exactly how the trip would look like and which kind of car or kind of mobility you could choose. In the middle you see who is your driver, how he was rated by other passengers. So it's much better, a much better product also for the consumers. And my own private experience was some years ago, before I joined Uber, in Mexico City. A friend of mine, and she told me she uses only Uber already for security purpose, because she knows who's the driver. She can share the trip with the people she's visiting, and then the people she's visiting can see where she's driving with whom. So it really increases not only the service level of comfort, but also the level of security. And on the third side, you see you can rate your driver, but the driver is also rating you as a consumer. So on both sides, the people start behaving a little bit more friendly, and this serves in the end to a much better product experience. So, as I said, it developed very fast, and our company was funded a little bit more than 7 years ago. And today we are in more than 600 cities, so Prague is one of them, more than 77 countries. We do 10 million trips a day, and we have more than 2 million partner drivers. So more than 2 million people within 7 years. 7 years ago we were at 0, now we are at 2 million partner drivers are earning their living, or earning at least parts of their living, because some people do it part-time, other people do it full-time, worldwide. And you all know, and you have read and heard about a lot of news about Uber, so such a growth story is also not an easy story, and there is also some pain linked to this growth process, and we are just in a situation of restructuring ourselves, becoming more mature, and also this process is quite a challenging process. But it's an extremely fast growth story. I think it's one of the fastest growth stories in the world economic history ever, and I'm an economist as a profession. And so it shows really the effect that digitized business models can have in transforming a part of our society in this way, starting with the mobility sector. That's how it looks like on the ground. That's the Southern Californian, the Los Angeles area. It's an area of more than 100 square miles. And in all the blue spotted areas, you can get now already, it was 2016, on a push of a button within 10 minutes a trip. So it immediately grows also from the big city centers to the outer areas. And that's not only in the US the case. In Paris, it looks exactly the same. Within 4 years, within a radius of about 30 to 40 kilometers, you can get on a push of a button now an Uber ride. And it has an extremely important side effect that in areas, and the brighter areas are areas that were defined by the government authorities in France as underserved areas where the traditional public transport is not serving enough the people so that they can really go to their job and go to follow their needs. And so we really jump into all of these holes where traditional transportation doesn't work well enough. And so we also create economic opportunities there, because mobility is also one of the bottlenecks for many people to increase their own professional career, to find a job in cities where there is a high unemployment. When we look to Prague again, so surely in the city of Prague we do a lot of trips also, but we do nearly half of the trips outside of the city center of Prague. So they start or end outside of the city center of Prague. And it shows really that we are complementing the transportation sector there. And it shows also what kind of need we have in the transport world. An additional effect for many cities is that many people coming from the world, they just expect to have Uber in the city where they go to. And in a city like Prague, it's more than 40% of our customers are coming from 97 countries. So it's a real international product. People expect to have Uber wherever they are. And for sure, it's always different to the mobility culture in the countries, in the cities, because from city to city, from country to country, people tend to move in a different way. So in a city like Jakarta, we have an Uber Moto. In Germany, this would be prohibited, because at least you need to have 4 wheels to transport people, and you need to have 2 doors on the right side. So in Germany, even a competitor of us who once started a service with Smart, so the Smart car, was prohibited because he had only 1 door on the right side. So this shows also how challenging our development is when it comes to look at the current set of regulatory frameworks. But it really shows the added value to the people. And we are not only active in the big cities, we also start going out of the cities, still in a very laboratorium, experimental way of doing it. That shows the Croatian coast. That's a product we started in the summer last year. It started as a tourist product. Surely most of you know the Croatian coast is really also a good space to go for vacations. So we started it as a tourist product, but it survived the whole winter. So also when there was no season, it was maybe not like you get it in Prague or in Paris within 2 or 3 minutes you get your ride. Then you might need to wait 10 minutes. but the pure system, organizing transportation on a push of a button, works also when you come to wider areas. It's not yet like this that we can easily copy it to other regions, but it's also the style how we operate. So we start in some areas, in some cities, in some regions of the world, a new product, then we learn, maybe we skip it, maybe we improve it, and then we try to implement it in other areas of the world. So where do we see ourselves in the future? We believe there is a way to organize in a more intelligent way the current way of individual car ownership. As I said, 95% of the time the cars are not in use and jamming the cities. And we see a big potential in order to complement the public transport, and we see ourselves together with other forms of shared mobility, like bike sharing, like car sharing, as really kind of network around the big player, the public transport companies, in order to modernize the mobility. That's an example from London. Here you see the inner city. Again, we didn't show because then it would be completely turquoise, but we show here on the blue lines all the trips aggregated that go from and to public transport stations. And it means that up to 33% of our trips start and end at public transport stations. So people use it as a kind of first mile, last mile product. And on the long distance they do with the railway, the short distance then individually with bags, or when it's raining they do with an Uber. And as we couldn't have drafted it better, that was after the London Night Tube was implemented last year. We saw a heavy drop of our pickups in the city areas. That's where the red dots are. But we saw an even bigger increase of pickups in the outer areas along the line. So the people were really using Uber together with the Night Tube in order to solve their mobility needs. And what didn't they do anymore so much? They didn't use the private car. So we really see in a better use of private cars our future growth potential. And to underline this, that's the demand curve for Uber services in most of the cities. So that's Amsterdam, London, Paris, Stockholm, Warsaw. In Paris, for understandable reasons, the nightlife is 1 hour later still going on. But you really see that that's the midnight time. You really see that at midnight it's the peak hour for Uber services. So again, that's the time when traditionally public transport doesn't run so regularly anymore, or you have to wait long, or for other reasons you don't like to be in a dark area waiting for your bus. That's when really we play out our advantage, and that's why we believe we can really complement the public transport there. So how will the future look like? Will it look like this? That was a great famous regulatory act more than 100 years ago in the UK, after the locomotives were changed in order to run on the roads. So in the beginning, the locomotives ran, as they still do today, on tracks, on railway tracks. But then they were put on the roads, like cars. So it was in the beginning of the cars. And then there was a lot of discussion if this is good for the city, for the future, for the environment, for the safety of the people. So a regulation came in place where it was said, okay, you can't drive more than 2 miles per hour in the city and 4 miles outside of the city. You need to have a guy running in front of you with a red flag, and you have to have at least 2 people steering and working on the car. I'm quite optimistic that the future of mobility will not look like this, also with business models as ours, because we see a lot of debates, a lot of discussions ongoing. We believe it will look shared, it will look electric, and it will look in the near future also automated. Shared, we do pooling already now in many dozens of cities. So it means that when you would like to go from here now to the airport, we would share your trip with the trip of someone else who joins the trip 1 or 2 kilometers later. So for a certain section of the trip, we make out of 2 or 3 trips 1. That's maybe easier to understand. That's how it looked like when I was going in San Francisco back to my hotel at night. And at the green dots, 2 other passengers are boarding. At the red dot, another passenger is leaving the car. And so you see 3, 4 people were transported. And it was only a very small extension of the trip. So I was maybe 4 or 5 minutes longer in the car. It took me a little bit longer, but the price was much cheaper, so it was good for me as a consumer. For the driver, it was good because he had never an empty car, so he had always paying passengers in the car. So we reduce again the time when the driver is idle. And for the environment, it's also good because we make out of 2 or 3 trips in cities, 1. So we reduce cost, we reduce congestion, and with a positive environmental impact. That was how we started. How we do it now is we already ask our consumers to walk and use Uber. So when you wait here and you would like to book here an Uber ride, we tell you maybe it's better if you walk 100 or 150 meters to the next corner, where an Uber might pass by in 3 minutes. And that's again, in the end, where digitization, where our thousands of colleagues being engineers, I'm an economist, are really moving the needle, because they make it possible that we avoid here, like here, circling around to pick up one passenger, so that in the end, the passenger walks to where the car comes, and we can save, so maybe 500 meters for each process, maybe 2 minutes. And if you do it 1 million times a day, then you can understand what kind of economic impact, but also environmental impact this might have. We already work with a lot of electric cars, some thousands already in the world, in dozens of cities. We just opened Zurich, we will soon open Munich also with this product. It's then like this, that you can just, on a push of a button, book your Uber Green. It's very simple for you to book, and usually the price is more or less at the same level. And here you can see how it looks like in Zurich when you go from Schweizergasse, Swiss Street, to Confiserie Sprüngli to get what you need to get in Zurich. And we really believe that this will be the future. So the future will be an emission-free car, and that's also why we are working on this, why we are investing a lot of money, brain power, and experience in this. Further on, we believe the future will be automated, and that's a Volvo car. We cooperate with Volvo on this, with autonomous driving cars. We already do it since more than 1 year. So we did more than 1 million miles already, and I think the big difference to other car manufacturers who do it, we already do it with Uber passengers. So we already call it, we are in the market already. And there's still a safety pilot in the car, and the pilot is still intervening regularly, but he's intervening day by day, less time. So we are learning on a very fast pace. And what I believe is the big difference really is, you have the technological side, on the other side you also have the behavioral side, so that people start to think about, maybe it's more fun not to drive by myself, it's more fun to be driven, it's more comfortable. And we also believe, and I think that's already quite a common guess, it's safer to be driven with an automatic car in the future, since we still have in the world, day by day, more than 3,000 dead people in road accidents, and more than 90% of those accidents are caused by human error. It will also have implications on the wider logistical area, so that's one of the trucks we used to make the first delivery on self-driven delivery of beer. And in a city like Prague, I really have to apologize that it's not the boudoir great beer, it's the Budweiser beer, but it was 50,000 cans of beer that were transported in the first commercial autonomous delivery. And we heavily invest also in this, and we see also a big future in this sector. What else? That's maybe a little bit far ahead, but it's also not completely unrealistic. Maybe I put it like this, then you can hear me better. We also operate with VTOL. It's called vertical takeoff and landing machines. And you can see those already flying around in some European countries in a test mode. So it's not just a crazy science fiction philosophy or novel, book novel thing. It is really a lot of dozens of startups. Can you switch it off? It's dozens of startups already investing in this, working already on prototypes, but it's also big companies like Airbus who are investing in this. Why? Here you can see how it would look like if we would use it on the Uber app. We call it Uber Elevate. So you would combine a trip where you are driven with a classical ride-sharing car, like in Prague. Then you would go to one of the modern digitized houses, and the part of the house, the top, the roof, you can use as a port for the Uber Elevate VTOL. And we really believe that with this technology, we can again improve mobility, because in many cities you need still 1 hour to go from the airport to the city center. You're stuck in traffic jams. And when you think about flying with an electric propelled small plane, or however you call it, then it becomes already also from the environmental point of view very interesting, because you don't have emissions anymore. You have much less noise compared to other modes of transport, and it becomes scalable also on the long term. So you see, there's a lot of very interesting things going on in the world. We are happy to be part of. We also made our mistakes. We learned a lot of lessons in the last 7 years, and I think, and that's a good thing also, we are very fast learning, so we also change processes. We also change the way how we do business, and therefore I'm really very happy to be here to discuss with you, and I'm happy to listen to your questions. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks very much, Roland. Fascinating insight into that. I mean, I actually joked earlier that we hadn't seen flying cars, but we are going to. How many people could fit in one of those?
As far as I have learned about it, it's maybe 2 or 4 passengers, and in the beginning it might be still pilot-driven. So again, due to regulatory questions, I think we will see them at first pilot-driven. But if you think about the drone technology, so my 9-year-old daughter, now she's 12, she once did like to get a Christmas present, a drone. So I bought it for myself and had a lot of fun with it already. And they are really so advanced, yeah, these technologies. What we 20 years ago thought it's never possible to build in such a small way. And if you think about it a little bit bigger, why not with passengers, yeah?
And it's just interesting that, I mean, you mentioned 12-year-olds as well, just how rapidly they're looking at technology and taking that expectation with them, I think, in terms of pace and what they can expect.
Yeah, I love most to explain her for what we needed once, phone booths. So when I was a few weeks ago in London with her, we made pictures in front of this nice red phone booth, but people don't know anymore for what you used them in the past, yeah.
No, it's true. That's absolutely true. Now, let's have a look at what questions we've got for you. I'm sure there will have been a number. Let's just see which ones. Obviously, there does Uber have strategy concerning upcoming restriction for government authorities in EU, including Prague? There was also one I saw earlier on London as to whether or not that was a sort of fighting back of governments and whether that had implications for Uber's business model going forward. Do you want to pick up some of those things?
Well, we go through it, and I like this system, really. I love it. It's also a kind of disruption of strategy of moderators.
Yeah.
But no, for sure. Why am I here? Yeah, I'm not an engineer, and so I'm not producing the product. I'm not a marketing guy trying to get more customers on our platform. I'm a person trying to explain regulators, people in the bureaucracy, which areas it might be a challenge with the existing framework, why it could be good for a country also. Let's look at Czech Republic with a strong mobility industry, but most European countries have a strong export-oriented mobility industry. So when everywhere in the world the mobility changes, I think it's necessary to be up to date also with the regulatory framework for new mobility solutions. But on the same time, it's not only that I'm explaining to the outside audience or to stakeholders in government, politics, what's about Uber and things like this. It's also a strong process where we communicate to our own team. So to explain our own colleagues why maybe some things we did in the past, maybe not so good, or we should learn out of it. And that was why I said we made big mistakes also in the past. We are learning very fast. And I really see a lot of change process going on in, I think, all European countries. And we're happy to be part of this learning process.
I can see I'm going to address the couple on logistics because that's obviously very relevant here. But you picked up the automation, autonomous vehicles. And there's a question there about when do you think 50% of Uber cars will be autonomous? without a driver, you can decide what that timeline is, because that probably won't be driven by you in a way. What's your sense of, I mean, how rapidly do you see that moving?
I think there are much more other people betting on this than whatever kind of investment circles, and if I would know this, I think I would be a really rich person. No, I think it's really difficult to say now, when do we see them in a big scale on the streets? We see them already now on the streets, and many companies, I think we are most advanced doing it with passengers, with consumers already, because it's not only the technology, it's also how to work with those things and how to live with those new technologies. But also all the big car manufacturers are investing a lot in this, and I think we will see it much sooner as we ever expected. And that's a learning lesson for me also from the time when I was in the government. I drafted a great plan of the strategy, the future plan of mobility for Saxony for the year 2025, and I did it in 2011. And to be honest, after 6 years, I have to admit, I had no clue about the digital speed of processes for the future. So I really think we have to be aware that these things come very soon.
And let's pick up some of those points about logistics especially. What's the vision and timeline for a business-to-business Uber Logistics?
We have already, so I could have added 20 more slides, but we have a big product. It's called Uber Eats. It's city logistic. It is a product where we combine or where we increase efficiency. So we put restaurants together with people who like to eat, with people who like to deliver goods. And we again act as a platform, as we do it in a ride-sharing business. And we started 1.5 years ago. We opened more than 100 cities yet, and I think it's 60,000 restaurants already on the platform. So it's in the end city logistics. What we do on a wider scale, what I have shown you with the big truck, we have a platform that's going live already. It's called Uber Freight. So where we believe this Uber principle, in order to increasing efficiency, can be used also for freight. And then again, in city logistics, we have a product. It's called Uber Rush. It's currently only in 3 cities. It's in New York City, Chicago, and San Francisco, I think, where we really do kind of first mile, last mile for shops and big retail chains, but also the small expert on whatever product in a city. And then we allow him with our platform to deliver his goods to all citizens in the city.
Okay, good. Before we go to the coffee break, let's take a look at the poll. Just so if we could bring the poll up, you've still got a chance to change this if you vote quickly. Oh, now that looks a bit overwhelming. So will the Uber model work for logistics deliveries? It would appear as though everybody here believes yes.
I think it's a good answer. Can I also ask a question? Because I would really love to know how many people here used Uber already. Or is it, I can't type it in now, no?
You can't type it in, but you could do a straw poll. This is not, we won't do percentages, but raise your hands if you've already used Uber.
Yeah.
If you use it, yep.
Okay,
that's quite good. Sean, not you? Not
you,
Sean.
I
can't believe it, not Sean.
You didn't raise your hand?
No, I did. That's only because I would drop this and then that would be a bit embarrassing. But yes, the answer is yes. No, yes, I do. And I also use it for all of my children.
Yeah.
And at the same time, they believe I'm an Uber driver. So I'm almost an Uber driver as well, which is extraordinary.
I can tell you something, since no one is listening. My daughter also thought that I'm an Uber driver when I told her I start working with Uber. No, but it's really great, because that's exactly with kids and also elder people. We are seeing them more and more in the more mature markets becoming also our consumers, our passengers. And so we are developing also products, because for many parents they believe also in it's safe and very reliable to transport their kids with Uber, but also senior citizens, it's still a question of how many people already have an iPhone, but more and more people have. So my family, my mother has one, the father not, so it's changing this process also, and there we will see a lot of increased mobility also for those people who really might maybe sometimes need more mobility as others who can still drive by themselves. Yeah.
Great, good. Now we're going to go to a coffee break now. It's been a great focus on brands and technology. Thanks very much for your help as well with that, Roland, as well as the other speakers that have been before.
I just have one question I have to answer, because
okay.
I'm a big fan of motorbikes, and there's a question, how about motorcycle? Uber would be a good solution during peak hours. I completely agree, and I would be happy to be a driver. But again, in most regulatory frameworks, it's forbidden because you have only 2 wheels and not 4 wheels. But
otherwise, you think it would be good?
Really a great pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Excellent. So after the break, there's a 20-minute coffee break now, straight through there. After that, we'll be looking at the new clusters. We'll be looking at people, which I think is really going to take what we've learned here so far today with Michael Bourlakis from Cranfield and also Philip Herkel from Cut E, CE. So we'll be looking at what the implications then are for people and society, and then after that, looking at solutions. But in the meantime, thank you for all of your comments. I look forward to more of those after the coffee break. And if you could join me also in thanking Roland, that would be great. Thank you, Roland. Thank you. That was great.
I hope I didn't interrupt you too often.